Welcome to the NOVRITSCH podcast. In today's conversation, we're gonna listen to Ripperkon, so Konstantin and also Dag, the team lead of the Textile Team here at NOVRITSCH. These two gentlemen will talk about NIR and its applications, so infrared camouflage. They will also talk about ghillie suit design, what's important, what's the difference between military applications and airsoft applications. Same goes for camouflage patterns because of the different distances that that they are used in. Of course, there's different design philosophies. At the same time, they're gonna talk about in general design and general differences between gear when it comes to airsoft and military. Really quick about these two gentlemen. First of all, we have Constantine, also known as Ripperkon, famous in the ghillie suit and crafting community since actually, I think it's 2010, if I remember correctly. I was actually watching his videos back then. Also an expert in all outdoor activities that are somewhat military related, that can be rappelling, camping, camouflage, and many others. Also, Constantine became an expert in gear that is related to all of these activities because he's doing reviews that you can see on his blog. And also, Constantine has 5 years of military experience at the German Bundeswehr. He was there for a certain amount of time, a paratrooper, and he knows a bunch of things, which is also why he's now working for Camo, which is a company that developed a very effective camouflage pattern that is now implemented with many military units. They're also manufacturing the famous Ghost Hood. Now, really quick to Dag. Many of you guys will know him from our social media, but he is leading NOVRITSCH Textile. He also has a background in fashion design as well as many years of military experience at the German Bundeswehr. He was also serving abroad and gathered quite some knowledge there as well. Dag also is playing airsoft since 20 years, and as you can see, this creates a very unique profile that enables Dag to create, together with his team here at NOVRITSCH, the products that you will find in our online store. Hope you guys will enjoy the conversation of these two experts in the field. Many interesting stuff that they will talk about, so please enjoy.
Thank you for your time. Hello and welcome to the podcast. So, how do I call you? Do I say Konstantin? Do I say Ripperkon? How do you want me to address you?
Yeah, I prefer Konstantin or Kon. That's my short version of my name, because Ripperkon is like only the brand and the name behind all the internet stuff.
There will be a lot of viewers who have heard about you, especially in the German-spoken region, but a lot of our international viewers will not know about you. So maybe you just start with telling something about yourself. Where do you come from? What is your experience with gear in general? And just what you have been doing in the last years.
Yeah, already as early in my life, as a small child, I was always attracted to the nature, to the forest, and was going outdoors. Mm-hmm. And after some time, I was seeing in the TV documentary about snipers. And there was someone hiding with a lot of grass on his suit and was really blending in. And I was like, oh, I will be that guy. Mm-hmm. And I was like maybe 12 or 13. And so I started to make my own ghillie suit. And I was, you're really young, no money, no big access to internet. So I was trying things out myself. And it was clear that I have to make it myself with my hands. And I started to assume tactical equipment and the ghillie suit and chest rig to carry all around my water by hand. So I had a lot of holes in my thumbs and in my fingers because all the hand stitching was really a pain in the fingers. And later, when I grew older or bigger, and I started to get more attracted to the tactical side mm-hmm. of all the military things, and I already had some experience with being outdoors, and then I started with airsoft. At some point.
So you actually have airsoft experience?
Yes, I actually have airsoft experience. But at the beginning it was also like only a group of kids in the village playing around, so nothing serious. So when the access to the internet became more available in the village, I was seeing that people can do it professionally, and my own ambitions have changed. And so I started to do more like milsim. Mm-hmm. which is still, of course, the Airsoft, and all the ghillie things got less important. But I was still doing a lot of ghillie stuff with YouTube, made a lot of ghillie suits. So this was the main experience. And then with the Milsim Airsoft, I was beginning to get a feeling about the military approach of tactics. And then I joined the German military. I have been there some years. And then after some experience in the Airsoft sport, I have quit Airsoft. But I'm still doing tactical gear and ghillie suits.
So what you're currently doing is mostly your review gear on your channel. Yes. And you have a very, as we heard, a very professional and very experienced approach to that, because due to the fact that you have military experience and also Airsoft experience, and you still keep on doing that. Do you still have like ties to the German military, or is it now just on the civilian-based gear?
It's also tactical. The thing is, relatively early, I started to notice if you want to buy the right gear, it's really hard to find experience online, which is trustful and really tells you if it will be good enough for a long time of use. Mm-hmm. So I really started to get into tactical equipment a lot. And then when I was in the military, I also talked with a lot of comrades and was improving my experience. And even now, I'm a civilian, but sometimes I do exercise with the reserve forces. Mm-hmm. So my bonding to the military is still there. And also regarding the equipment reviews and so on, people from police and military are in contact with me and ask me for my opinion. And so I'm still connected, yeah.
So you pretty much made your hobby as the full-time living as a job still.
Yeah.
The love for gear and... for example, also in further notice like camouflage.
Yeah, that's right. But I also do product photography. So the tactical equipment and the reviews is only one part. And I'm also working at Ghost Hood in the development.
That is Concamo.
Yeah, that's basically Concamo. But the clothing in Concamo is the brand Ghost Hood. And there I'm developing the patterns and the products and helping with the pictures also.
Well, now that we set the stage, that people know like who you are, we can go into the next topics because we have some stuff that we want to talk about. So you mentioned that you did play Airsoft. What was your experience, especially when you played Airsoft in Germany? Because Germany has some very specific laws, to say the least. And when you mentioned Milsim towards it, did you have anything that you had, okay, you would like to do that, but you were not allowed to do that, or it wasn't possible in the German aspect of the law side?
Yeah, at the beginning it was the regulation of that you are not allowed to carry those weapon lookalikes around in public. Okay, that's okay. I totally support that law. But when you are in a forest, which is your own forest, or you are allowed to be there, you can carry the airsoft gun, but you're not allowed to shoot there. Mm-hmm. And this was a big problem in the beginning, and that was a bit of annoying because I had access to a forest, but I was not able to shoot there because there is no fence around. So someone could walk in and you could accidentally shoot at them. And that was my first thing that where the law was limiting my possibilities. Mm-hmm. And of course then later with the accessories for guns like lights, for example, that are forbidden here in Germany. So in Austria they are not. Here in Germany,
yeah, exactly.
A weapon light is actually like a real gun. So it's really bad to own a weapon light here in Germany.
So it's not easy to play Airsoft in Germany.
Yeah, that's correct. And there haven't been a lot of areas where you can play. So you would have to travel a lot of distances or large distances to play somewhere like in Malwinkel, for example, at the big games.
Yes.
And early in my time, I was not driving around that much. And I started driving around for bigger events when I started with Milsim.
Have you visited, for example, since you mentioned Malwinkel, have you visited Dark Emergency, for example?
No.
You should.
No. Maybe I did. Or maybe I will in the future, but not now.
I mean, are you thinking of coming back into Airsoft just for the hobby aspect of it, like maybe every few months? Or is it something that you totally closed as a chapter in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm still not really sure about that. I made some bad experience with Airsoft, and then I said, okay, I will not do anything with Airsoft again. I had a lot of videos online about Airsoft, about my setup and so on, and I deleted almost all of them. And that was a decision that was not easy to make. And yeah, I started to use Airsoft like a training tool to stay in the game with shooting and weapon handling and safety. But now I don't really own an Airsoft gun. But I want to get into Airsoft a bit more again, but just not sure in how much. So if I will go to events or if I just do it with my friends somewhere in a closed location, we will see.
I mean, it's fair enough. Like experiences vary. There are some people that when you have contact to them, you can have a bad experience, and that can pretty much kill the fun for you.
Yeah.
So I will understand. I totally can understand that. But it's still, from my point of view, it's such an amazing hobby, which gives such vastly opportunities. Because okay, if there's a team or a field somewhere where you have a bad experience, you can still find different playing fields, different people, and just make, as you mentioned, a small group of people just with friends and have your own fun. Especially if you have the ability to have a field. Now, I think with the German law, it's easier as long as you have like a team that covers it, that you can play on private property or so.
Yes, as soon as no one can walk in, it's relatively easy. Yeah, but it was not only the people, it was also the gear itself or the guns themselves, because compared to a real rifle, those airsoft guns are not reliable. Or not close as reliable as a real gun.
It depends,
so that was the main problem. It depends, yeah, but when you sleep outside in the snow and you want to shoot in the morning and then you have cool down or your battery dies, and it's
there's
compared
some pretty
to military
sophisticated
pain.
guns.
But it depends, of course. Yeah.
For example, if we talk about Systema PTWs, which basically are professional training weapons, which are also used by some police forces and military units on the world.
Yes.
But at that price point, we are talking at the same price point about real guns already. So
yeah, that's right. But also with the Systema, I had a Systema, and when you don't use the original magazines, for example, you try to save some money, and then as soon as the small lip on the magazine breaks, you're basically standing there, and then the factor of the people comes in. You're playing somewhere, have driven like one day somewhere to a big event, and then you're shooting with your 2,000 euro Systema at some opposing forces, and then you hit them and their highlanders go away, and then the fun is gone.
That's true. That's always
that's just sad. So, but that doesn't always happen. There are a lot of good things in Airsoft, and I really like what I was experiencing, and it was a good time.
If you go for the gear, because you mentioned you had your setups on YouTube for Airsoft, what difference do you make from Airsoft to real experience with the military? Because there's people that play Milsim that use actual gear, and then there's people that use just Airsoft-specific gear. Would you see differences in designing the specific gear? Like, do you see one as sport and one as exercise, or do you see that both of them have similarities and can learn from each other from designing standpoint?
Yeah, that's also a quite complex question. Of course, it's relatively like an individual thing. What does an individual want to achieve with Airsoft? What do you want to do? From the weapons or the guns, in some countries it's toys.
True.
Alone, there are of course some similarities, because you're having someone in your hand where you have to have the grip and you have a magazine, so you have to stow these magazines, and so you have to have magazine pouches, and they have to be accessible. So there is a similarity, I guess. When it comes to ventilation, weight, durability, infrared camouflage and all, there is the biggest difference. Yeah, in Airsoft, people know about protection because they have to wear glasses or goggles. That's really important. And also something for the teeth. But as soon as it gets to the military thing, people are shooting at you with more energy, more joules than you can imagine as an Airsoft player. So their protection is a whole different thing, and the stress factor. but from the gear, they can learn, of course, from each other, because sometimes military and military equipment, because of the tenders and people that say like, we all always have done like that, it's harder to give a change sometimes.
Yeah, we noticed that also.
And with Airsoft, you're a bit more free with developing and designing something.
True. You mentioned durability. From my viewpoint, I would say durability is sometimes comparable depending on, if you say the baseline, what every recruit wears, that maybe has to use them one weekend in a month where they actually abuse the gear. I think that some airsofters, or a lot of airsofters, actually abuse their gear quite more often than the regular standard soldier in a standing army without combat experience. Let's say it like that.
Sure.
Which is why I think that durability-wise they can compare to each other, but also, so for example, we take inspiration from sportswear, also, and military wear, because some sportswear needs to be durable, but in different aspects, and then we can use functional fabrics more so than military. But since we don't have to look out for the point of flame resistancy or insect repellent stuff, or which is one of the bigger points of the talking, would be NIR, and which is, I think, one of the biggest points where people are either completely set on two different spectrums, like you need it or not, or there's some others that say, oh, you need it in both, and there's some very, let's say, the vocal minority that says you definitely need it in airsoft, but the starting point to have it useful for you is like $3,000 for a pair of knots, where not everyone wants to spend that money. So maybe you can explain more what NIR means and what it's doing.
Yeah, NIR is basically the near-infrared spectrum, and in the visible spectrum or in the electromagnetic spectrum, you have a really big spectrum of wavelengths, and only a small portion of this is the visible light, which you can see with your eyes. And on one side you have UV, which is ultraviolet. Some birds can see it, for example. And on the other side there is the infrared, which starts with near-infrared, which is what night vision devices also see. So they will see the visible spectrum and near-infrared, and then there comes other wavelengths where it's also the thermal somewhere. But the near-infrared is basically like really close to the visible. And with night vision devices, no matter if you have a tube or when it's with a digital night vision device, it makes the near-infrared visible for the human eye. So it turns the wavelength and you see it with your eyes. So for example, when you see something like a jacket in black, and most black jackets, like insulation jackets, they are black for the human eye, so really dark. But if they are not especially infrared treated from the color side, they will appear white in the infrared spectrum. So when you look at them with knots, you will see a bright jacket. But with the pure eye at daylight, you would see a dark jacket. So this is where the infrared mixture of colors is super important, because if you don't have a jacket which is with infrared colors, it's possible that it will shine out against a low reflective ground. But what a lot of people don't keep in mind, that leaves are almost white in infrared, because the chlorophyll in the leaves are super reflective. But as soon as you go in the bushes and are somewhere hiding in the shadows, and where dead leaves are laying around, there you will need something darker. But when you're a big shining white glow worm or a Christmas tree, then it's easier for people to see you, especially if you're moving and you're in front of a tree and for example in front of the bark or dead trees, then you will shine out as a white human being.
But to notice that, yes, of course, like especially with some colors you need the treatment, but there's some colors that in themselves they have a different spectral analysis in the infrared spectrum, so they shine or reflect differently, which is like the first try to make a night vision compatible camouflage was Desert Night Camo, the pixelated one for in the 1990s. And I mean, of course, it had also to do with how the sensor picked up the viewpoint. So if you had something on yourself that would resemble something pixelated, it was more so blurring the lines of the sensor. But I think this is where it all started with the two-colored camouflage. And later on, people noticed also, I mean, you mentioned black, which is the best example, because that's why, of course, when you are behind leaves, you can still camouflage yourself or disguise yourself depending on the pattern. Because if the pattern has a black in it that it's not treated well, yes, that part of the black will shine. But if the rest of the colors are mixed better, you still have the possibility to disguise yourself, which is what basically happens with the original Tiger Stripe, which does have some NIR capabilities, even though it's not treated in any way, just because of how the colors are mixed.
Yeah, the thing is also that the night vision devices in the night still collect some of the visible light, but the mixture of light is different. So even if you have no special infrared treatment, just like you said, it's also possible to have some effect into near infrared.
So you are going very thoroughly in your tests with your reviews. I saw some videos of you where you did make infrared tests, and or the newest one where you made a ghillie test against the ghost camo hood. And are you always this thorough with every test that you make, or?
It depends. Some things, I mean, I think you also know you have a lot of gear, and there are some things that you just use more than others. And if I do a review to something that I don't use that often, of course, sadly, I cannot go into the same depth as I do a review on something that I'm using like every day. For example, I have low boots, which I can wear all day long in the office when I'm going to the city or whatever. And when I have the mountaineering boots, I have to go to the mountain and go climbing to write a review. And then I have experience of like some hours. And the other one, I can tell people I have worn them like years, and they are perfect. So yeah, that's not always the same, but I try to do it with the, something like a long-term test. So I keep most of the things I test. Some other people or sites are just presenting them, showing, hey, this is the makeup I'm using, it's cool, but I will not use the backpack or whatever for longer time. So it's, if you're looking for something that can help you to decide what you want to buy, in my opinion, it's better to ask someone who have used it for a longer time. And sometimes it needs months or years to tell this is a good product.
True. Speaking of products, we did send you a little goodie bag, basically. And we were speaking about the differences in military design and airsoft design. What do you think about our approach for the airsoft plate carrier, for example? Even though you don't have now currently airsoft experience, but you have had in the past, were you able to test it for yourself and have your unique viewpoint on it, or what's your opinion on that currently?
For now, I haven't tested it. I just took an intense look at it and put my hands on it. But I will take a closer look in the next time or the next weeks, and try also to give it a try outside. And I really like the approach of the ventilation, because also when I was playing airsoft, I was like, hey, you're using plates, but you don't need to. So then you have the problem, you have like military gear, which is not breathable because there would be a plate inside, which doesn't breathe at all, only to the sides. And with your approach of the ventilated plates and the ventilated plate carrier, in my opinion, that's a good thing to make airsoft more enjoyable. Because the problem you have in the military, those people usually are super trained and they know what they are doing, and they can play plates for weeks and it's not a problem. But in the airsoft world, if you don't run around with plates like weeks, then it can be a good thing to help you to have good ventilation, to keep you fit and not collapse when doing intense BB fights.
Which is true, Yeah, the main design point was, okay, we are trying to find problems that most airsofters have when they are wearing plate carriers. And almost all people that we talked to were like overheating, which is the main problem. So the design didn't start with the plate carrier, but actually with the plate. and then we designed around the plate. So the first design came with the plate, and then the plate carrier was built around it. And we tried to find solutions. Okay, where do we have the openings? Because we have openings on the top. I mean, I have some here. We have always the same openings for the plates that are like in the carrier where the plates are, because heat normally goes up, and when you take out the plate, it's the heat channels on the inside are this way. Most people just see, okay, it has a hexagon look. I mean, yeah, okay, but when you're looking from the top down, you see that there are like channels to the top, and the openings for these plates are exactly where the mesh on the plate carrier also is. So, which is what we tried to make, because there's other manufacturers already like cutting hexagon holes in EVA foam plates, which yes will help, but without a plate carrier that has ventilation on it, it will not make it any difference. And without having holes on the open, it will also not make that much of a difference, and why so much time was spent on the plate at the start. And
I think that's a really good thing.
I mean, yeah, the difference is it's for airsoft, not military use, but still it had to look like a military product.
Yeah. Also, if you think about a plate carrier and someone is used to a plate carrier, I think it's really good that it's a sturdy plate. And yeah, also training plates have become a topic over the last years, because
I've heard that,
if you use the real plates in a training scenario and it falls down, or it can get damaged while training, and that's totally not worth it. And so I think also this is an interesting thing for training, maybe.
But for
even
training,
if it's not the real weight.
Yeah, exactly. With training weight plates, they have more weight to it, as far as I know. For example, 511 has some plates. They have almost the same weight as the ballistic plates. But if it's just for the movement, when you just want to have a plate carrier on and you don't want to have to wait for like dry firing or something, it could be a possibility.
Yeah.
The plate carrier that we have sent you is in our pattern, and Kreuzotter. So you got a few uniforms, you got our hot weather boonie and the plate carrier. Were you able to have a look at the hot weather boonie and the pattern itself, since you also are like very involved with designing camouflage patterns and photographing them, testing them? What was your first impression for Kreuzotter?
What I like is the amount of brown that's inside it. It's
I'm just smiling because it was one of those. Yes, we want like a brown dominant one. So sorry.
Yeah,
please go
but
ahead.
the thing is, when you're standing outside of the bush, of course, the bush is mainly green, at least in summer and most of the year. But when you go inside the bush, the ground is brown. And also, when I was building my Ghillie Suits, I was mainly making a brown base, and then I was adding leaves. So when it comes to camouflage, to have a brown base and adding green things is, in my opinion, a good thing. And same with the pattern. With the brown, you have something that is really suitable when you go through bushes and you're hiding somewhere. And as soon as you go outside of the bush and run over an open field, no camouflage really works. So it's all about positioning, the tactics behind it. And with the tactics in mind, you will mainly be inside the bush. So brown, really good. And from the design aspect, I also like the thing that reminds a bit of the Tiger Stripe.
I mean, it is based on Tiger Stripe. There's so we never made a secret out of it. So Tiger Stripe is the base. And we then took this old classic because we wanted to have a pattern that is recognizable to everyone, but is not currently politically aligned to any faction on the world, but is still like airsoft is also about looking cool and not also about camouflage. Like both should be possible. But Tiger Stripe is one of the most beloved patterns for most people, and we wanted to bring it up to the current century, basically, or to the current age by adding micro and macro patterns to it, having it work in different environments, depending on the eye chooses itself which color is the dominant color, because if you're looking like laying in a green dominant area, the green actually pops out more. And of course, since you're the guy to talk to also, we did get inspiration from other camouflage patterns. But I mean, when you look at the more. So it's currently designed in Illustrator. So we made a vectorized file of it. Then we took photographies of veins of leaves, of tree bark. We vectorized it, we zoomed it up, and we had different layers on it. That's why we put the brown layer on top, so it gets a depth of field effect that you would look at if you look at the bush where the trees and then the bush itself has a depth of field to it when you're looking through. And so we never made a secret about it being tiger stripe. It is more an honest homage to a tiger stripe, in our opinion.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good aspect, and yeah, it's recognizable as a modern type of tiger stripe, but with better colors.
One of the main aspects was, as you mentioned, black earlier. We wanted to get rid of black entirely. It's not, I mean, there is camouflage patterns that work with black still in it. If you especially look at the hunting patterns that imitate shadows with black, when you have like, let's say, how are they called? Real tree patterns. They sometimes have like black as shadow color. And it works as long as you're still. But black only works when you're already playing also with the sun and light and the shadow of their surroundings, then it can work well. But we wanted to get rid of black completely with the pattern. Choose, I mean, it's 10 colors, which is basically insane for a camouflage pattern.
That's true, yeah.
But I think it worked out well that we had the small, the thin red line between being over the top with colors and not recognizable anymore.
Especially the thing is with colors, if you add like 100 more colors at some point, if you move away from the pattern, because it doesn't have to work at like 10 centimeters.
Exactly.
It has to work at several meters, or even in the military at least at more than 100 meters and so on. And there you don't get the benefit of adding more colors or more super small squares and forms. So I think you really hit the thin line quite good. Yeah.
We had a lot of talks. I did talk to Matthias also in the design aspect, which you guys had with Concamo, and was drawn to the experience also that you guys made, because as you mentioned, there is the small thin red line between macro and micro. What is the first point in designing a camouflage pattern should be, where is it used to? What is the distance the potential viewer of the pattern needs to be addressed to? Okay, do I want this pattern to make myself invisible to up close in 10 meters or 5 meters or closer, or on 20 meters or so? And that's it. It is something that has to be taken into account, which is why, from my viewpoint, every pattern has its own uniqueness. For example, if we say woodland pattern, still has its very own field of view where it works really good. Of course, it's not the best pattern for under 50 meters or 30 meters, but it breaks up the contour of the wearer so much by 50 to 100 meters that it still has its usage all over the world today. While, speaking of Concamo, it's a good pattern that's on the close range, for example, in my opinion, of course. Where you can be really close to it and it disguises your shape by even when you're in the open. And with Kreuzritter, for my example, it's you have this middle ground. It starts really good with like, let's say 15, 20 meters up to 80 meters, and which is exactly normally the distance where you're at Airsoft at.
Yeah.
Because I noticed under other patterns that are the digital patterns, for example, where they are really good at disguising in a certain distance. The farther you get away, it's just one color blob that moves around, and like it's not having contrast anymore. There's no concealment of the form.
Yeah, that's also the problem on the military side of camouflage patterns. There are some patterns, as soon as the uniform is washed like 2 or 3 times, or even when it's tested, it has to withstand some wash cycles and so on. But when soldiers wash them wrong, or when it's just the pattern itself is not in my opinion, not a good pattern, then people or soldiers standing in a group at some meters, it will look like they are standing there in like one color. I don't want to tell examples here, but
we don't have to tell examples. We can show them. So, I mean, this is the not washed out version of the new Austrian camo, but I'm sure most of the people have seen the pictures when the new uniforms were washed the wrong way, and it instantly turned had this gray shine on them that no matter the distance, you always had like a shimmer around them, which is of course the wrong usage by the wearer. But it also, I mean, it depends on the printing process and how good the fabric is. And I think altogether plays part in this because you can wear every uniform wrong. You can wash every uniform wrong. No matter how good the pattern is, it can end up being less effective when you treat it in the wrong way.
That's right, yeah. But speaking of gray, if you remember the universal camouflage pattern, that only works on a couch or in a pit where gray rocks are laying around. But it was used in some sandy areas where the sand is more like beige, and soldiers were standing or really shining out with this gray color. But it's in military, it's more than just the camouflage effect. It also has to be recognizable, what you mentioned earlier, but also in the military that you have to be able to tell if it's an enemy or one of your comrades. And I think with a camouflage pattern that shines out, you really make it easier to see, that's one of our guys, he can be seen,
Which was a problem with multicam when it was introduced by CRY. Originally not a military pattern, but a civilian organized pattern. That once more and more forces started adopting multicam for their special operation groups, that it was not recognizable for, let's say, certain groups to distinguish between the groups they were fighting with in certain regions of the world, which is why then they switched from multicam to OCP, which is basically still a multicam, a little bit zoomed up and just different colors. But yes, of course, uniformity is one of the main reasons also to make a camouflage pattern, which is why some countries have bright blue camo patterns, where there's no camouflage value whatsoever, but it has a value for them to, this is this and this unit, or this is this and this army.
Yeah, that's correct.
We spoke shortly about the distances. When you're designing a camo pattern, is your approach also from your experience now, you will always talk to the customer, or are you just designing the camo patterns that you design from your own gut feeling that it works on almost distance? Like, what's your approach and what's your goal?
When it comes to this designing the pattern itself, I just give some advice and some help. So the main designing is not on my side. I just help it, but with the colors. And we get some feedbacks from the customers, but as a manufacturer and developer, when you talk with customers, of course, in a perfect world, they would give a feedback that you can use one-to-one in the production and the development, but often they cannot relate to the problems you have as a developer. And they have some fancy ideas, so it's not always easy to implement these ideas. But of course, the communication with customers is super important. And we also keep this in mind, but most of the time, it's, in my opinion, better to focus on their own ideas and to their own experience, develop a really good product, and then when you have it and you only are open to small changes, you give it someone and see what he tells. And if they have big changes, it would be something different, which is not possible. But if they have small changes, I think this is the point where the customer feedback is most
friendly sent back and say we have thought about everything, but we cannot implement this.
But only when it's a small thing, the fine-tuning, then it can help. If they say something like, hey, it would be cool to have a loop here or something, or maybe the colors, we need something that is more brown because here it's like green or stuff like this. But most of the feedback is not always easy to put it into development.
We do have the same issues. We get a lot of customer feedback for wishes that are not very realistic. And in the most cases, we actually went through the same thoughts. Like
Yeah,
most
that's
of
right.
these things we had already in mind while developing. We're like, okay, this is either not possible or too expensive to make, or would not make sense on this product in this price
Yes.
range for this customer target group, let's say. And communicating this has been a very, very unique point in not only in my history here, but I think in every development position, because it's not always easy to make people understand that we value the feedback, but we are educated in doing this. It's our job to do this, and we have thought about most of these things already, but we don't have the time to explain why we don't do it, because then we would spend more time explaining than developing.
Yeah, and this is time that you could use for more development.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's just you you have spoken my words, or these words I had in my mind, because it's just as you have explained, you may have a big process of the development, and at the beginning you think about, should we add a button here, and then you think about everything. Maybe you also make prototypes with this feature, and you try it out and you see, as soon as this and this happens, this doesn't work. And then after weeks and months of development, the customer says, hey, I would like to have this feature. And you say, yes, but no.
I do think that some people don't realize how long something like this takes.
Yes.
We tease something, and the point where we tease something, it's already like done. It's already ending mass production. And when we show it, I mean, most military gear companies show their prototypes when they are already in production. And that's not the point where you take like large changes anymore. And there has been like 1 or 2 years in development before. And it's hard to explain that, because people don't want to feel devalued when they give feedback, because of course they are the customer. But at the same point, you kind of have to tell them, thank you, but as you said, thank you, but no. This makes it hard, especially with a customer base that is so vocal as the Airsoft community, where when you say one wrong thing, they are directly all over you, depending on whatever they want or not want, because you cannot always please everyone.
That's right.
I have seen it with the plate carrier. We spent over 1.5 years completely developing, and one of the first comments I read about it was, it's just a copy of Templar's gear. And it's like, where? Just because it has a plate. And it's like, for me, I really didn't understand the feedback, because I can understand the feedback when I look at some older gear where the form, before NOVRITSCH had a textile department at all, where there was forms taken from others and or sourced materials. But now everything is designed on their own, and comparisons are always a little bit a two-sided sword, because you can actually devalue the people that make it. I've had a lot of comparisons for the plate carrier. I have also heard a lot of comparisons for Kreuzhatter, for example. I mean, of course, for the naked eye, people see colors and see forms. Two comparisons that come to mind are Tiger Stripe, which I don't mind, because yes, it's based on that. And then the second comparison that we got was always Con Camo. And then the third was Rhodesian brushstroke, which I really don't understand.
Yeah.
But with Con Camo, it's like, I can see what they mean, because both patterns are with micro elements that are made in illustrators that have like fading effects. But I mean, both aim to be used in the same environment, and of course you use different, or of course you use similar colors. How do you see comparisons between Kreuzhatter and Con Camo?
What I think is, when you look about marketing, I don't want to go too much to the side, but right now people have Con Camo in mind, and the whole community is big, but it's also small. So people that are talking about camouflage patterns see the latest camouflage patterns, so they already have it in mind. And if there is like Con Camo and they see the colors suitable for an environment, just like you have said, there is brown and there's green, and the shapes are disruptive and oriented on the nature also, so it's comparable, of course.
Yeah,
But also because people have it in mind, they already have a pattern in mind and see, hey, there's some comparison, or you can compare it a bit. But if you know, I'm sure if you look at Kreuzorter, you will see and you will notice all the shapes, or at least some of them. And when I look at Concamo, I see, this is that shape, and this one is there. Oh, this green is a bit more blue than the one before. And it's just the first impression, and I see shapes and colors and say, hey, it's close. But in reality, if you look close, it's not that close.
Pine Survey made a really good test and review of the pattern with close-ups and explaining it really well. I think, which is also one of the more thorough, basically go-throughs about the pattern process, because Pine Survey, we gave the opportunity to visit us also during the development process. From me, in my point of view, I understand the comparisons, but on the other hand, I sometimes don't, because we get some flack for it. For example, it's just Tiger Stripe. But when then, for example, Cry Precision makes their own Tiger Stripe version, everyone is like, yeah, the next tactical distributor's Tiger Stripe is there. But when we make a unique pattern, which is not a copy of Tiger Stripe, but actually the evolving Tiger Stripe, it's like, it's just a copy. And creating a pattern takes years in time. You know that, and we know that. And those people think, just take Tiger Stripe and slap some brown on it. That's it. And it's not how it is.
And some sprinkles.
Yeah, but that's how people think it's done.
That's right. But it's always with development. At least I feel like that. People, when it comes about pricing, for example, if you have a company that does a lot of development, those developers have to get money. And some people say, hey, this pouch it's just material like $10. And but someone was sitting there like 2 years developing it, and he will improve it again and again and develop other products, and this has to be paid. And some people just see the material and the stitching, and someone who is putting it all in a box and shipping it somewhere. And shipping, no, that's too expensive. No.
Yeah. Which is basically what a similar experience that we had.
Yeah, but the thing is, as long as you don't have experience in this development process, and as long as you don't see how everything works, how long it takes to get raw materials and so on, you are not able to understand how complex all this is. At least in my opinion. Of course, if you go somewhere and get a good education and someone is telling you everything and you believe them, then you can also relate maybe. But I think if you don't have experience, it's really hard to be aware how long small changes take and what can happen in development and how it works.
Yeah. Let's go back to the Ghillie set of experience that you had.
Yeah.
Because this is still one of your main sticks, basically, with the Ghillie ponchos that you developed, which is basically just like a poncho that you put over yourself, really lightweight as far as I've seen it. And so this is again an example of usage and target group, in my opinion, because you have used full military ghillies, you have built them way before your time at the military, and it will not suit the same target group as, for example, a scout sniper from the military that are building them on their own, that have to have the ghillie suits smell like their surrounding, that it's basically just a lump of cloth and earth that disguises you not only in the visible spectrum, but also from dogs or whatever nature is around you that could detect you. But so far the aim for these ghost hoods is, okay, you have a fast, lightweight thing that you put over to camouflage you when you are basically, I guess, for the police, where you more so don't have camouflage as your base color and can put it over yourself.
Yeah, for example, the thing is, let's say, technology or the design is something new, because camouflage was heavy before, and camouflage uniforms are working good, but for example, the German Flecktarn is quite dark, and as soon as you move somewhere, maybe it doesn't work anymore. And when you are able to carry something which is super light and you can throw it over your uniform, you can improve your camouflage, and you don't always have to carry the ghillie suit. When I was starting to make ghillie suits, I was really in love with the ghillie suit. Big, bulky, heavy, corduroy everywhere. You can crawl through bushes without getting thorns in your skin. But in the military, really only there was the change from the classic ghillie suit to the ghillie cape. So soldiers were wearing their uniform, just a standard uniform, moving with a platoon, for example. It was almost only the sniper rifle which was helping the enemy to say this is a sniper and this is a normal soldier. So as soon as the sniper rifle was hidden in the backpack, for example, the sniper looked exactly like a normal soldier. So if you observe a group of people walking somewhere, you cannot tell, hey, they have snipers. We have to watch out. You just see like soldiers. And then with the ghillie cape, they already had a benefit of a more compact system than the ghillie suit. And using the uniform, then putting on the ghillie cape, and then they are camouflaged and snipers. And now with the approach of Ghost Hood, it's even more compact. Of course, also police can use it a lot, and maybe they use it, I don't know. And in military, it's also possible to use it. Yeah, also as an addition, for example, I recently made a comparison video, and there was going through some points, and as an addition, for example, to the ghillie suit, you can also use it quite good. Yeah.
And do you have experience with airsoft ghillie suits? Like, for example, our NOVRITSCH suit is made of a different mesh material, and the approach is it's more lightweight than the standard ghillie suits, but it's also not as lightweight, for example, as your material, but the approach is using fake vegetation instead of real vegetation more so, especially with the 3D leaves that we have. What do you think about that approach for that? Because from our approaches, we have different leaf colors, we have different base colors, and we aim for that the customer can basically adjust it to each playing field that they are.
Yeah, at the beginning of our call, I was talking a bit about we always have done it that way, guys. So, and then in the Airsoft community, I think it's maybe 3-4 years ago, all this ghillie suit with some real looking leaves on them started to evolve, and the military is not ready for that. But I really think there is a good place for it, and the camouflage effect that you can achieve with suits like this is amazing. And especially in an airsoft environment, you have to be fast sometimes, even as a sniper. At least that was my experience. You're hiding somewhere, but you can only shoot like maybe 50-60 meters accurate, and then you have to move and work with the pistol, which almost has the same range like a sniper rifle.
In some cases,
almost. Yes. Yeah, and so have to be fast. And with this suit, with camouflage on all sides, that's just the thing to do. You can go prone, or you can just knee down, and you can stand up in the bush, and you are camouflaged from all sides. Yeah.
I mean, it comes with the points of that these leaves are made of different materials, which of course are not NIR, because the materials that they are made of reflect the light differently. Do you think that NIR has a spot in airsoft or is needed, or especially considering ghillie now?
I would not say it's needed, but this is also like a super individual thing, because if you're going to an event where there are gear dudes with knots and everyone is spending a lot of money for night vision and thermal devices, I think it's helpful. But yeah, camouflage is not always the colors and the near-infrared. It's also all the tactics behind it, the movement. And on close ranges, like in Airsoft, yeah, I personally, when I was only playing Airsoft, I would not focus that much on near-infrared. Yeah.
But you mentioned thermal, which in this case is a different thing. We have thermals are quite more readily available than actually knots. You can get a decent thermal spectrograph for your airsoft gun for in between 1,000, 1,500, and you basically just have white, black, or red heat or whatever as a setting. I don't think that NIR makes any difference there, because you just see the color blob of the heat, and with the suit then, that's why I'm saying, like, okay, you now spent 2,000 on an NIR ghillie suit. The guy itself was wearing the knots, so yeah, of course he can see the others, but no one else has knots, so it wouldn't matter anyway if his suit is NIR. And then if someone has...
that's right.
and then you have the one guy who has the the thermal device who sees everyone, no matter if they have NIR or not.
Yeah, then it's also all about tactics. The funny thing is, in the civil world, where also photographers, for example, could do photographing. I'm sure your suits could also be used by hunters or photographers.
Yes, yeah.
And some animals, I mentioned earlier that some birds can see UV, ultraviolet, for example, and some other animals can see a part of the infrared spectrum. So there it also can be useful if you don't have an opposing element which has knots. But yeah, in Airsoft, I think for most of the people, it's more like, I want to have something which is like real, for the feeling, for the role play factor maybe, and yeah, but from the practical side, not necessary. Only if you have opposing forces with night vision devices.
That's
and
the thing,
about
it depends
thermal,
on...
yeah, and a whole other world.
Have you used, in your Airsoft time, anything this high end, like with NIR or knots or thermal devices?
Yes, in the beginning, mainly because I was starting with relatively cheap used surplus things from the German army. It was a BDU jacket from the German army, can be bought for like €1 then the time. It was used, but it's still with the infrared. And later when I was doing milsim, I was a bit focusing on German army stuff, because I was also in the German army, and so I was able to use the equipment I was using for Airsoft in the duty also. It was just the same. So that was the main reason, because no one of the opposing forces or friendly forces was using a real night vision device.
Do you think there's many people that are active duty that are playing Airsoft? Not only for training reasons, but just that they are using their own gear, and like, do you know a lot of people in the German army that do that? Or
yes, but it's in Germany, at least, it's quite special. But I think on the whole world, it's a bit special with military and Airsoft. It's like, oh, he's an Airsoft guy, ooh. But it seems like it changes. It starts to change, and also soldiers try to see the value, the value behind Airsoft. And that's not always playing. Of course, it's two different worlds, but I'm also not making fun of someone collecting those stickers on Briefmarken.
Yeah, stamps.
Stamps, yeah. I don't make fun of them. And soldiers playing Airsoft, it's a good thing, because you have an open-minded community where you can try out things. For example, you can try different tactics. Sometimes in Airsoft you need different tactics because of the range, for example.
Yeah.
In the military, when you do like peeling, or you move away from the enemy, you know they can shoot like 600 meters or more. In Airsoft, sometimes you just have to turn around, go 2 steps, and you're out of range and say, hey, ciao.
That's true, yeah.
So you have to work differently. But from the communication side, especially in close quarter combat or in the CQB scenarios or whatever, it's really close. You can work on communication, you get experience of how is it to operate in such tight spaces, and the feeling alone of being awake the whole time and looking for someone and being ready to fire and have to decide, do I shoot on this person or not?
Yeah. And what about the handling from the gear and the guns in this case? Wouldn't you like agree that dry firing a lot with Airsoft replicas does give you some sort of training also if you would be a soldier? If you have the same replica that you would use in...
Yes, 100%. It's if you use correct. If you go at a speed game, put in your high cap and shoot the hell out of it, the training effect will not be that high. Before I was in the German army, I was watching Magpul Dynamics, the art of dynamic handgun. And
Who didn't? I have all the videos still. So.
Everyone. Yeah, it was legendary. And I was using Airsoft pistol and also CO2 pistol with 4.5 millimeters, which is more like an air gun. and I was applying those techniques and putting all the effort in the stance and watching all this and doing target shooting, and also shooting, running and gunning. And when I was in military, first shot with the pistol, it felt like it felt just, I was used to it, gripping this pistol. And my first shot ever with a real pistol was like the center.
Oh, nice.
Okay, the second shot was almost a miss because I was so, whoa, fuck, that was good. The kick was harder, but I was really proud of myself being able to use it as a training tool. Yeah.
And
a safe training tool. That's the main advantage in my opinion, because it's safe. You can train with it if you do try fire with your real handgun. Yeah, but with the airsoft gun, of course, you can damage a monitor or the screen of your PC, but it's a lot safer than giving someone a real handgun and shoot through walls.
We are also making gun covers with ghillies, and since we're talking about the handling of guns, would you see that some of these guns, because of course you have a different approach to reloading, especially the sniper versions of the airsoft guns are different, the way we attach it. Normally there's two approaches. There's the people that just paint their sniper rifles because they don't want to put the weight on a floated barrel and stuff like that, so that you don't have any millimeter or micrometer it moving when there's weight on it. And especially when you have long distance shooting, and you have to, but at that point you have to take Coriolis into effect and everything. But so, and then there's the people that I don't know, watched movies like Sniper or something where they burlap the whole thing through, which is still also being done by some Marine Scout snipers. But then it's still applied to the gun itself. There's not much in the real world application where they use quickly adaptable gun covers in different colors so that you don't have to paint it, but you also don't have to actually attach it to the gun that stays on it. Why is that?
At least it's not often seen, I would say.
It's not often seen, yes.
Yeah, it wasn't accessible by companies before. Now it is. So you provide one, and there are also other companies providing rifle covers for camouflage. But the thing is, an airsoft, when it's wet, for example, and you have everything wrapped in burlap, and later it's not that bad because in worst case the BB doesn't fly straight. Let's make it simple. And in the military, when your rifle gets wet and it's freezing and it's starting to get rust, and when you don't hit, you will die, or comrades can die. So the consequence is a different one. But I think it was mainly not seen that much because it was not accessible. And because of things you mentioned with the floating barrel and the aim to have the highest possible accuracy at long ranges. And when the sniper is applying the camouflage directly before the operation, then usually no pictures were made.
Well,
at least that's what I would say. And maybe it's also the effort from the exercises that they don't want to wrap too much. Yeah. But from the camouflage aspect, if you try to camouflage something which has a silhouette like the sniper rifle or everything in general, when just painted, you still have the sharp edges. So from the camouflage side, it's a lot better to apply something, even if it's just some leaves or just some burlap around the barrel to break out the outline. So camouflage is much better than just with spraying it.
Have you seen some of our gun covers, like on pictures? Or
I've seen a picture, yeah, but not in detail.
Okay. Well, it's basically the same material that we use on our ghillie suits, the military mesh, so that people can use the pin system or zip tie the leaves to it, and then have the 3D leaves as base, depending if they want to shorten it up or if they want to get rid of them, that's up to them. But there is a base shape breaking already done, especially on the barrel, and then people can attach it. But we also try to always make them that line of sight is staying clear of the leaves, so that the leaves are always coming sideways or on the bottom. because we have seen other covers that were like, oh yeah, it's completely covered in leaves, and then you see them on the barrel, and you say like, okay, try aiming, and then there's like, oh god.
Especially if there's sun shining on those leaves, then yeah. Yeah, what I also think regarding those covers in military, sniper usually is far away from the target, so maybe the rifle camouflage is not as important than like it is in airsoft. If you watch like this British guy, this Mustang guy, he's completely covered and he's sitting there and shooting with the pistol with silencer, also camouflaged at like some meters, but for him that's like the standard. But in military, this is like not a standard.
It wouldn't like there's not a lot of people that would actually believe that it's possible to if you stay motionless. But as you mentioned, it's also the tactic. If you believe you are a bush, you become the bush, which is like it's a lot about your mindset also, because people are more oblivious to their surroundings when under stress than you would believe. Even if they can see your boots, sometimes people just see over them because they're so focused on the far back and not on what their surroundings next to them is.
Yeah, they don't expect it. That someone is laying there. Okay, there were some 2 spots or something, but as long as they don't see the shape and the shadow of the human being or the rifle sticking out of the bush, your brain
blends it out.
Doesn't recognize it, blends it out, and says it's not important. Look for more information that give away position of the potential opposing guy. Yeah.
No, which is true. But which brings me to a point, psychology of camouflage, because also, like, do you, for your own sake, make a difference between camouflage and concealment?
Yeah, of course. That's a good question. That's from the aspect when you go to cover and concealment. That's in the tactical world also a big thing that some people think concealment is cover, but it isn't, and concealment also is not camouflage. But the words, it's details, but if you really dive into it, it's super important to keep this in mind, because I think the concealment is more like applying the right tactics, reading the environment and moving through it correctly. And the camouflage is more like blending in and then using the concealment to hide your movement, for example, or to hide your position even better than just with the camouflage.
But both plays into designing a pattern. So you have to, example, as you said, okay, if it makes a difference if you are laying in a bush behind the leaves or before it, and then when you design the pattern for it, you have to anticipate how the user in the end will use it, which is why some desert patterns were always okay, these people will lay flat on the sand, so we have to imitate the little shadows that little sand whales are making, which became 3-color desert. And then there's patterns where, this person will mostly stand next to a tree being motionless while hunting, which then became real tree.
Yeah.
So when designing,
it's really important to consider this. For example, like earlier, when you stand in front of the bush, in theory you could be completely green, like the whole bush. But as soon as you move inside the bush, or you kneel down, or you go prone on dead leaves, or maybe on the ground there's different vegetation, then it will not work anymore. Or especially the winter environment. That's, in my opinion, a really good comparison or good thing to consider when on the ground there's snow. So it's white. But if you're standing and you are in white, the background usually is trees without snow, so your top should not be white. Yeah,
and the first attempt of the German snow camo with the green splotches of it that imitated pine trees and stuff like that, and now they have their flecked-on snow version. But I think it also depends. Okay, are you standing up in an environment with small trees where you have like the little green coming through where there's no snow on it, like in northern areas? Or are you standing in the middle of a wood here where the tree tops are up there? And snow camo is really interesting for me because most people think, just take a bed sheet and cut it up. But even that, a bed sheet turns wet and wetness changes the color. Then you are shining at, like, there's something bright white, and then you are a gray blob because your white bed sheet turned gray because of the water.
Yeah, snow camouflage is super complex also.
Which, I mean, we noticed when we tested Kreuzotter in wet environment that some colors or some camo patterns, each camo pattern will turn darker. That's just the nature of water on fabric.
Yeah.
But you have to try to get the colors in a way that they turn the same amount of darkness than the environment does, because wood turns differently dark than a field when it gets wet. A field stays green, but woodland, the ground on the wood itself, which is normally really brown, but it's a brighter brown, and as soon as it turns wet, it gets a really darkish, almost black brown tone. And that's why we had this more so brighter brown added than other camouflages, because the aim was, okay, have it work on a wood ground environment, and when you turn wet, it still should work somewhat.
Yeah.
But the best example of this would be the old Austrian MK4 camouflage out of the 60s and 70s, if you know how that looks like. It's basically a brown base, and then you have like green and dark brown jelly beans on it.
What's the name?
MK4.
MK4.
And then Austrian camo. It's like it's in the 70s and 80s, so it was already in the time of the new Bundesheer.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just brown with little green spots and darker brown spots. But it has an amazing effect in woodlands when you're laying on the ground. And if that turns wet, it still conceals you really well and camouflages you. This was the base for a lot of Austrian scout snipers throughout the years, because they had these thicker parka-like jackets in this camo. So they actually sewn on the front, like the canvas, how we know it, and then on the back they added some fisher netting, and the base was just this brown, but it worked really, really well.
Yeah, I believe that. Also, the camouflage patterns from the Second World War, there are some that are really good because they also had the brown in mind, the brown colors in mind, and I once was at the Airsoft reenactment game with all these Second World War colors and camouflage patterns, and I was amazed, or I was surprised how well they worked. And same with this, when it has to fit to the environment, especially if the brown, the material gets wet, it's darker brown, but it's just like you mentioned with the ground. And the leaves, for example, when they are green, they don't change the color that much. They just get differently shiny. Sometimes they even reflect the sky, and then they look more shiny, and all the colors get more
contrast on it, basically.
Yeah, more contrast on it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We tested different versions during the development of Kreuzotter. So we had different colors palettes. We had some versions that were bright green. We had some versions that were dark green. And since we tested all these different versions, we came in the end with the version that we came up with, that we sent you, because the other ones didn't perform as well in all the different environments, which was also part of the testing. Not only working in one condition, but testing under different conditions.
Yeah, that's important. Also the combination of colors. Yeah, that's also the funny thing. Sometimes brown in a specific tone can work good with the green in another specific tone, or sometimes some colors have to look exactly like the surrounding, and sometimes you need colors that don't look like the surrounding to work. There's this one, the Belgians have this red inside.
Jigsaw pattern, yes.
Yeah, and in Switzerland, they also had this super ugly red inside, but there's, again, the distance when you're far away.
It breaks up the form.
It seems to work. I haven't seen it work, but it helps sometimes.
True. Well, then, from my point, I say thank you to the nice gear talk and about camouflage. And I look forward to your testing of Kreuzotter and the videos. And hope you enjoyed the talk also, and that we meet again next time on IWA.
Yeah, it was really nice talking to you. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really curious about the effect of Kreuzotter, especially now in the autumn where it's brown. And
I'm really interested to see that, because we didn't have much testing from outside people in autumn and winter regions, and so I'm looking forward to that.
I was also looking at it at infrared already, so
Okay.
Stay tuned.
That's one of the points that we already heard about it, that people tested it with infrared, and that it is not intended to be, but it has some infrared values. So we are excited to see your results there.
We are coming to the end of this quite intense podcast here with Konstantin and Dag. If you want to check out more of Konstantin's content, you can find that on Ripperkon.com. That's his website for the reviews and also his blog. You can also find him on YouTube on many tutorials, many interesting reviews on products as well. Also here, just look for Ripperkon. Same goes for Instagram and TikTok, so go check him out, and thanks for your guys' time.
Thanks.